Hello, hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to a Capital Hungry educational webinar on the psychology of losing, and more importantly, understanding the psychology of losing. So, through my experiences in life, as well as more importantly, within the trading industry, I have noticed that the concept of losing is very hard for the majority of people to understand, swallow, and almost very difficult process for people to adapt to as well. And I want everyone to go through this webinar with me and actually understand the psychological process of losing and how we can take something that is seen as such a negative in terms of the emotional response that it causes, but instead turn it to a positive that can lead to a lot more growth, self-awareness, self-reflection, and overall success across various platforms in our life. This webinar is going to be in conjunction with the normalizing losses in trading webinar, where that educational webinar, normalizing losses in trading, that's more based on the actual numbers and risk management in trading, focusing on a risk versus reward, positive risk versus reward ratio, accepting small losses and so forth, right? More focused on the number side and how a positive risk versus reward ratio with a 50% win rate and controlling your losses can lead to monetary success in trading. But this is going to be more talking about the actual psychology of losing and the process that I see the majority of people follow when they take a loss. Okay. So understanding the psychology of losing, capital hungry market research. Webinar agenda today. Number one, what is losing? The concept of losing, the definition, and what is the natural emotional response to losing? Even though this may seem very common sense and well known, a lot of people, when it comes to actual application, they usually just end up running on autopilot. They're not thinking about these various concepts. They're not active in their decision-making process. They're just in the moment, involved in what's going on right now, right then, and most likely, majority of the time, following an emotional response. Okay. 2, emotional response to losing versus a logical response. 3, how losses highlight weaknesses and allow for changes. There is no winning without losing, and vice versa. 4, changing our perception towards losses and losing. Okay. So just a little quote here from philosopher Aristotle: we can't learn without pain. This is going to be something that I want you to keep in the back of your mind, because it's going to be very important in understanding the process of a loss and how you cannot actually learn or grow without taking losses or without going through periods of suffering and pain. Okay, so what is losing? Well, the Google definition is very simple. Losing, suffering resulting in or relating to defeat in a game or contest. To lose, to be deprived of or cease to have or retain something, right? This can be very simple as something like I've lost my appetite. This can be something more easily applicable to what we do, like losing your trading account, not retaining the capital in your trading account due to making very poor decisions, right? So the definition of losing or lose or loss is very easily understood by the most of us. It involves some type of suffering, some type of defeat, and is most likely entailed with a negative emotional response, right? But what I want all of us to understand, and this has been discussed in the normalizing losses webinar, even the human errors and efficiencies webinar, is that what we can understand is that through life, we will experience many losses, whether they are controlled or not. So losing is inevitable. What is important is the reaction to the loss and steps taken after. Now, the size of losses, the degree of losses, this is going to depend on your circumstance, on your situation, on what you are trying to achieve in your life, right? But The fact that you will take losses is inevitable. Don't get me wrong. One person, let's just say you have two people that are trying to become a professional athlete. They're trying to become a professional basketball player, right? Maybe through various circumstances or environmental changes in a person's life and situation, they may suffer or go through more losses in quantity or a larger degree of losses versus the next person. But that doesn't mean that the next person isn't going to experience the feeling of losing or the event of loss. This is something that's inevitable for all humans in one point or another throughout our life. You know what I mean? So what I want everyone to understand is the definition of losing is, of course, resulting in defeat, being deprived of or cease to have or retaining something, suffering resulting in or relating to defeat in a game or contest. But this is inevitable, okay? So when something is inevitable, when something is unavoidable, you have to understand that, because what I want you to do is, when you understand something is unavoidable, you have to adapt your psychology to that situation. There's no point fearing something inevitable. There's no point allowing something that's inevitable to hold you down. And there's no point allowing something that's unavoidable to prevent you from growing. This is really redundant. It's really counterproductive at the end of the day, right? The hell happened here? Okay, nice. So the human response to losing. Because losing is seen as and is a negative outcome, the majority of emotions triggered are also negative. Nobody enjoys the process or event of losing, and it naturally results in emotional reactions, right? Because your brain's emotional triggers and reactions is a lot different than your mind's goals, desires, and wants and needs out of life, right? For example, let's just say you take a loss in trading. Your mind still has the goals and desires to be a great trader. You really want to follow a logical approach. You really want to find success. You're trying to put the work in. But regardless of that, when you take a monetary loss, you're going to have these emotional reactions triggered by your brain, because you're going through this period of pain, potential suffering, and defeat, right? So even though nobody, of course, majority of people do not enjoy the process of losing, and it naturally results in emotional reactions of anger, jealousy, envy, hatred, regret, lack of confidence, and self-sabotage, this is all normal, right? I don't want people to think that when they feel like shit after taking a loss, that something's wrong with them. No, that's step number one, right? We understand that the definition of a loss or losing is going to be negative. You're suffering a defeat. You potentially are giving up something or not retaining something that meant a lot of value to you, right? But the majority of people, when they enter this period of defeat or loss, the emotional triggered feelings will have them feeling like they are wrong. What they're feeling is incorrect. That's not the issue. The issue isn't the natural emotional feelings that are triggered when you take a loss. The issue is the decision made after the fact when you take the loss, okay? So it is very normal to have the above natural response: anger, jealousy, envy, hatred, regret, lack of confidence. Let's say you're trying to be a 100-meter sprinter. You're training to sprint. You think you're going to be the fastest in the world, but then when it comes to the competition day, and you're on that starting line, when the race starts, you end up coming in second or third, right? Majority of people's natural instant response isn't going to be, shit, I lost. Why did I lose? That's not the first response for the majority of people in the masses. They don't go, why did I lose? What was my weakness? What was I lacking that led to this failure or loss? No. the first initial response is going to be maybe angry, being angry at yourself, having jealousy or envy at your competitors. Man, this guy may be on steroids. This guy was using this cheat. This guy did XYZ. It can result in a lack of confidence in yourself. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not, this isn't for me. Why did I even bother? And so forth, right? So what happens is this normal response is very expected. It's what's normal. But people end up making a decision about their future, about the craft they're in, about the sport that they are trying to achieve success in. They end up making a choice or decision based on these emotions, right? This is where more failure comes into play. This is where self-sabotage and self-destruction really gets further highlighted. So it is very normal to have the above natural response to losing, but to make a choice or decision based on the above emotions will lead to even more losses and even more suffering and a destructive cycle being created. Because if you, just like we were talking about in the mental clarity webinar, and how you direct your mind's battery and how you focus your time and energy, if your goal of your mind, let's talk about the example of being the best sprinter, right? But you just took a loss and you just came in second or third place. You didn't get that first place. If your goal is still to be the best sprinter, still to come number one eventually in this competition, but you end up making choices and focusing your brain's battery on all of these emotional triggered and responses, what do you think the events that will come to follow shortly after? Do you think that you're going to be self-reflecting and seeing why you lost, where your weakness is, where you need to change your training regimen, maybe you need to change your diet? Or are you going to be focusing on your competition? Or are you going to be focusing on your lack of confidence, on why you aren't good enough and so forth, right? All of your mental energy, your mental battery is going to be funneled into these negative emotional feelings, which will just result in further losses, suffering in a destructive cycle. A very easy to understand example for us as manual day traders and retail traders is think about when you take a loss and you take a loss in trading. Let's say it's a controlled loss. You initially come to the chart with pre-planned analysis, right? You come to the chart with the expectations of wanting success in this individual trade you're looking to execute on. But you have an understanding that a loss is perfectly acceptable and can happen in any condition. So you're following pre-planned analysis. You execute at a pre-planned price point of interest, but based on volume and volatility or the fundamentals at play, you end up losing that position. Obviously, the initial feelings that will follow the natural emotional triggered response is going to be anger, envy, hatred, regret, lack of self-confidence, and so forth. We all understand that if you allow these emotions to consume your mentality and the following choices and decisions that come after the loss are dictated by this, that it's going to lead to over trading, over leveraging, switching your pair, doubling down, and lead to even more losses and suffering. But we all understand that when you take a controlled loss, that if you're focusing on logic, if you can accept the loss, if you can reset your mentality, focus on the risk versus reward, and come back again emotionally neutralized, that you will have a higher probability of making a more logical, sound-based decision rather than emotional decision. This is why, if you notice during our live scalping sessions, whether we win or lose, I always tell individuals emotionally neutralize yourself. It doesn't matter if you even won a trade and you're feeling all great and ecstatic and yes, I'm a winner. Victory is mine. You still have to emotionally neutralize yourself so you can have the best logical decision-making process possible, right? So it is very normal to have the above natural response, but to make a choice or decision based on the above triggered emotions will only lead to more losses and suffering in both life, and trading. So what we want to take away from this is the first initial human response to losing is perfectly normal. It's perfectly acceptable, but we do not want to let that emotional response to losing lead to impacting and dictating our decisions and choices that follow. Okay? Now, emotional responses versus logical responses to a loss. Emotional responses to loss are the instant psychological triggers of feelings. Emotional responses are the feelings of anger, resentment, regret, hatred, envy, and so forth. Okay? Making a life or trading choice based on above emotional feelings will result in more suffering. The above can result in an individual quitting, giving up, lack of growth, lack of patience, and no self-awareness. Another example we can give with this is, let's just say you have somebody that's very morbidly obese, right? But they make the choice based on logic that they don't want to live this way anymore. They want to lose weight. Now they end up going to the gym and saying, hey, I want to try to work out for an hour today, but they end up going on the treadmill or going on the bike and they only work out for 15 minutes and are completely wasted, done, tired, huffing and puffing and so forth, right? They had the expectations they could work out a lot longer because they have the goals of wanting to change their body. When they realize that this is a lot harder than what they expected, this can give the feelings of self-hatred, resentment, anger, and so forth. This can result in the person quitting, never going back to the gym again, which would result in a lack of growth, never being able to achieve the body they want, and also a lack of patience and no self-awareness whatsoever, right? Versus logical responses to losses, which are delayed. The logical response to a loss, like understanding a loss is normal, understanding losses are inevitable, accepting a loss in life, and then planning your attack accordingly after. That is not the initial reaction to a loss, right? If that was the psychological initial reaction to a loss, people wouldn't be taking more losses. They would learn their lesson, adapt, react accordingly, and the whole culture towards losing would be completely different. The reason we have this negative culture towards losing in our modern society is because people end up making decisions based on the initial emotional responses to losing. They end up making a decision in their life while they're feeling angry, while they're feeling resentment, while they're feeling regret, hatred, envy, jealousy, and so forth. If you understand and follow the other Capital Hungry educational webinars, you would understand that the majority of decisions made in our society, if they follow emotional, impulsive sources and are dictated by these types of emotions, it's going to end up leading to self-destruction, right? These are the exact same types of emotional triggers and reasons where people cannot cope with their reality and existence of life, and they get pushed and funneled into chasing short-term satisfaction, because that short-term satisfaction and dopamine hit can help temporarily numb out these feelings, but it doesn't provide a solution to these feelings. What provides a solution to these feelings is having an actual logical solution to the event of loss and failure that resulted in these feelings, right? For example, if you take a loss in trading and your stop loss gets hit, if you end up following emotional responses of anger, resentment, regret, hatred, and envy, it's just going to lead to further amplification of these feelings, right? But if you were to look at the actual logical reason of why you lost the trade, take a lesson away from it, have some more self-awareness of, you know what? The reason why I lost this trade is I didn't actually enter as per my pre-planned analysis. I was impatient. I entered way too early. I had FOMO and entered way too late. This is an error or a mistake made by me that increased my probability of a loss, because sometimes you can do everything right and still lose in the markets based on fundamentals or volatility or what's going on. But the majority of individuals' losses in trading are self-induced, right? So you have to be self-aware and say, hey, actually, the reason why I lost here wasn't the market. It wasn't my stop loss was bad or anything. I entered 30 pips after where I said I was going to enter, or I didn't wait for my actual entry. I entered way earlier. This was a mistake. This was against logic. This was more following feelings and so forth. When you take a lesson away from that, when you actually have some self-reflection and awareness, the next time that situation arises, your brain has a trigger of, wait, don't enter so early. Or wait, you missed your trade, don't enter at all now. Don't FOMO in. That process increases your probability of preventing failure and preventing another loss. Does that make sense to everybody? Right? So the issue is that the logical response to losses are delayed and they come after emotional triggers, right? Think about it this way. How many of you have taken a loss in trading and then you enter what I like to call the stupid state? You take a loss in trading, right? That's step number one. The loss occurs, the event of failure or defeat. Step number two is the natural emotional triggered response, right? Number three, where people fail, is now they make their decisions based on the emotional response of feelings, right? They end up over trading, over leveraging, entering the stupid state. Now, after their decisions and choices are now dictated by emotional responses and feelings, step number four is they end up crashing their account. Once they crash their account, then the logic comes in. Then they go, what the fuck was I doing? Why did I just overtrade? Why did I just take 5 more trades after this loss? Why did I triple my lot size? Why did I jump to 2 other pairs? Then the logic comes into play. When you already felt so much suffering, when you already lost your trading account, when you already failed in whatever you were trying to achieve in fitness, then the logical response comes, right? But the key and goal here is for us to have an understanding of these entire concepts, because when you're self-aware about this process, when you understand that this is a natural process of the brain and emotional triggered responses, then the next time you take a loss, the next time you feel that little bit of envy, that little bit of hatred or anger, you know you have to jump in now, intercept that thought process and process of feelings and emotions coming into play, and bring in logic to the table, right? So logical responses to losses are always delayed. And for majority of people, unless you actively train your mind otherwise, including myself, even after this much study of psychology, being involved in the psychology, giving this type of education to other members, it's not like I don't follow the same process. My brain still goes through the exact same process that I'm sharing to all of you. But I have become more trained to be able to say, all right, I'm feeling a bit angry. I'm feeling a bit vengeful. This isn't a good time to trade right now. Or I just took a great trade. I'm on a high right now. I'm feeling like a god, like I can't be touched. This is also not a good time to take another trade, right? We have to train ourselves through consistent repetition of understanding these emotional responses, accepting them, allowing them to enter our mind, but then choosing to follow a logical path afterwards, right? So logical responses to loss are delayed and come after emotional triggers. Logical responses are understanding losses are normal, a perfectly acceptable part of life. Logical responses will involve learning, planning, and adapting before making another decision. Do you understand that? A logical response isn't just making another decision right away. No, A logical response to a loss has a process within itself. First, you have to learn of why you made the mistake. What did you do wrong? Then you have to plan accordingly of how to avoid that mistake again. Then you have to adapt to the next possible scenario of when you can make a logical decision based on your planning, based on your goals, right? But the majority of people avoid the logical process of making a decision because obviously they get triggered by the emotional feelings, which is the initial response of the brain. Logical responses of controlling emotions, accepting losses, planning, learning, and so forth allow for growth. You have been self-aware enough to see where you went wrong. You can highlight your mistakes. Then you start to create a plan of attack on how to change these mistakes, and you grow, right? An example, a very easy to understand example, is someone who may be addicted to drugs. If they eventually wake up and become self-aware enough to realize that this addiction is destroying their life, the logical response would be understanding and highlighting this addiction that they have, the outcome that is destroying their life, controlling their emotions, and having a plan on how to remove the addiction. This can allow for growth, for them to no longer be addicted, for them to bring positive change in their life. But you can never grow or change if you don't even accept the loss as what it is, right? If you're only following the emotions, you will forever be addicted to that drug, substance, event, or whatever it may be. Okay? So emotional responses with feelings that come into play, the usual initial triggers, they usually lead to an impulsive decision, snap of a finger, just like that. But a logical response, it takes a bit of patience, you stepping back, taking a breath, looking at the situation from a bird's eye view. The decision that follows isn't going to be at a snap of a finger and impulsive. And it shouldn't be. It should involve a bit of thinking, right? That extra minute of logical thinking in a scenario such as trading can prevent you from making a lot of mistakes. Taking an extra minute to 5 minutes to sit back and say, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? And self-reflecting can really stop you from burning accounts, throwing away capital, over leveraging, over trading, and so forth. Okay. All right. So where's the next page here? I think my Epic Pen glitched this out. 1 second here. I just got to restart the presentation. There we go. I had my Epic Pen open. So another thing that people have to understand is that through the inevitable process of losing and also following a logical approach to losing is where you highlight your weaknesses, right? You're not going to be able to identify and highlight your weaknesses as a human being where we all have weaknesses, we all have flaws. You're not going to be able to identify that through wins, right? Majority of people through wins do not reflect what they were doing wrong. They just have the initial reaction of a win, validating that what they did was right. That's the initial reaction of a win, right? So losses highlight weaknesses, meaning only through suffering a loss and realizing you were not good enough or made certain mistakes that prevented the win is the only way to ever become better. Sorry, little typo there, to ever become better. Most individuals will not acknowledge personal weaknesses through wins and victories. When individuals may win at a certain situation, they already met the conditions and guidelines to win. So there's not going to be this natural process of reflecting or learning. The majority of learning done by anybody successful, whether it's an athlete, a businessman, entrepreneur, CEO, doesn't matter. the majority of learning is through losing. Through losing is where you find out you made mistakes, you were not good enough, your weaknesses get exposed, and so forth, right? So any win can be taken as the user performing various events and tasks more efficiently, correctly, or productively. Majority of the time, the financial, mental, or physical loss will highlight, expose, and amplify a person's weakness. A great example is in trading. If you have very poor emotional control outside of your trading life, just in your day-to-day life, like I always give the example, if you're raging and getting angry, stuck in traffic or something that's out of your control, or waiting in a line for something, then those same negative emotions and lack of emotional control in trading, that weakness, which is a weakness, right, is gonna get amplified tenfold. If you can't handle being in traffic or waiting in a line and you lack that much patience because, oh man, my boss is going to be after me, all these other things, and you're raging about it, it's all emotions that are triggering these various responses, right? If you can't even handle that, how are you going to handle losing money? Right? And to me, winning and losing is like sadness and happiness. You cannot understand or experience one without the other. There's this great quote from an author, American author. I don't know if he's American. I think he is, Harlan Ellison. I know that pain is the most important thing in the universes, greater than survival, greater than love, greater even than the beauty it brings about. For without pain, there can be no pleasure. Without sadness, there can be no happiness. Without misery, there can be no beauty. And without these, life is endless, hopeless, doomed, and damned. People think that they want to be happy all the time, that they want to be winning all the time. People think that because of what is sold and marketed in this consumeristic society of chasing short-term pleasures and satisfactions. But the reality would be, if you only had happiness, if you were only winning, your life would be absolutely dull, boring, and the happiness would no longer hold the same effect as previous situations. Eventually, it would become more and more dull, more and more adapted to. It wouldn't even hold the same weight of happiness as it did when you initially felt happiness. It would actually, in my opinion, the happiness would naturally transition into misery because you'd become so adapted to that feeling, right? Without losing, you would not know what it feels like to win. Without sadness, you would not know what it feels like to be happy. These are concepts of the same coin. They're just on opposite ends of the coin, but it's still the same coin. You can't have one without the other, right? So it's through your losses in life or trading where, number one, first of all, your losses will always highlight your weaknesses, but you may not see your losses highlighting your weaknesses if you're following emotional triggered responses. You're going to be completely fogged out and you're going to be completely unaware of the weaknesses that are causing your potential losses. And you're going to instead be following emotions. So before you could even be self-aware enough of the weaknesses that are being highlighted, you first be able to have to go through that process I was laying out of understanding losses are normal, of understanding when you lose, there's going to be certain emotional triggered responses, of working past those emotional triggered responses and being more logical. Once you're at that stage of taking a loss and your mindset is more logical, then you can be able to highlight your weaknesses that those losses exposed. Okay? Now, what does that mean for us? It's not just about highlighting the weaknesses. When you highlight the problem, when you make yourself aware of the problem, now you can spend time, effort, and energy creating potential solutions for the problem, right? For example, in trading, let's just say that you are taking a series of losses. The first couple of losses, you only reacted to emotionally. You realize reacting emotionally didn't result in any growth. It didn't provide any solutions. It only led to more money being lost. Then the third and fourth loss after that, you brought a more logical approach. You instead looked at, why are you losing? What are the mistakes you're making outside of your trading plan? You realize that you're entering trades way too early or way too late. You're either not there at the screen, you're missing it, you're getting FOMO, and so forth. So now you realize that this is an issue that's causing your losses. This is the real world event of you entering trades too early, too eagerly, a lack of patience that's causing the loss, right? Now you can sit there and find some logical solutions to that. One off the top of my head being, all right, instead of just staring at the charts, I'm only going to wait for alerts. At my price point of interest, I'm going to set an alert. Then I'll start watching price action. This will prevent me from just mindlessly staring at the chart. This will prevent me from entering too early. This will keep me more in line with my trading plan. I'm only going to wait for alerts at price point of interest. Then I'll look at the chart. You just create a solution that can prevent losses. That would never occur if you were following an emotional process. You would never have that change, that growth. You would never have that knowledge of, okay, this is why I'm losing. Now I can change it. Just like fat people who only follow their impulsive emotions and feelings of fat acceptance, I'm healthy at all sizes, beauty and all this, how I feel, right? They will never be able to actually change their body or become healthy because they're not even aware of the weakness that's there. They're only following their emotional, impulsive feelings and desires, which is validating their obesity, validating their poor health, which is promoted in this consumeristic society, which is a weakness. And guess what? That repetition of these emotional desires, that repetition of further fueling this weakness leads to self-destruction. But the logical process can lead to self-enlightenment, more knowledge about yourself and awareness to change. Okay? Pain is needed for growth. Just like you'll go to the gym and it's very easy to understand, oh man, I'm doing these bicep curls right now. By the 8th or 10th rep, damn, I feel that pain in my bicep. But you know you're doing those events because it's going to lead to growth, right? When you're learning something new, you're going to feel stress, tension in your mind. This is that version of pain, right? It's not killing you. It's not ending your life. It's not doing anything just that destructive to you. It's just a little bit of pain. You're bringing something new to the table. Something foreign that your brain isn't used to. Right? So this is a quote that really, really resonates with me in trading, in life, because nowadays in the modern society, nobody as a human being wants to feel any sadness. They don't want to feel any pain. They just want to numb out all of those quote unquote negative emotions, and they only want to feel happiness. But then when you look at the modern society, how many people are truly happy? Depression's going through the roof. Suicide rates are higher than ever. Dependency on opioids and other antidepressants. It's because nobody is trying to pursue the experience of life anymore. As a human being, you're supposed to feel sad sometimes. You're supposed to go through suffering in life is inevitable. These various events of dealing with pain, dealing with suffering, and how you adapt accordingly and come out stronger is what builds your character. This is what's going to help develop your gratitude, appreciation for life, keep you humble, keep you grounded to reality, not so trapped in your own thoughts and emotions and feelings like the majority of weak members of society nowadays, right? It's one of the most important things in the universes. Okay, so some summary points so far. Losing in life is normal and also needed. Losing in life, losing in trading is inevitable, it's normal, and it's also needed. The natural human response to losing is a flood of negative emotions and feelings, regret, hatred, so forth, yada, yada, yada. But following the natural human responses to losing will lead to more failure. We must be self-aware of the natural response, but choose ourselves to follow a logical outcome or process. Losses are always lessons as they highlight weaknesses. This allows for change. Please make sure that with this webinar, you watch the Normalizing Losses educational webinar, as it's going to talk about more in depth with trading, the probabilities, and the plan of success when focusing on the numbers and being able to accept losses. Okay. Takeaway points and lessons. Same thing. Understand losses are inevitable in life and trading. Focus on any losses as a lesson and do not follow the natural emotional response. Allow the loss to expose your weakness. It's okay to feel weak sometimes. That's perfectly normal as a human being. But if you never expose your own weaknesses, how can you ever change them, or how can you ever turn it into a strength? How? If you're always trying to avoid your weaknesses, if you're always trying to run away from your problems, if you're always trying to run away from your losses, how can you ever find any growth? So allow the potential of loss that you may take in life or trading, allow it to expose your emotional or physical weaknesses, and be open to understanding these weaknesses and changing. An example in trading may be a lack of patience or over trading that leads to loss. Reflect your losses and weaknesses and create a logical plan of attack to change, changing bad habits, training your mind, learning new information, and changing your perception. In life and trading, do not allow inevitable losses to destroy your goals or take you off your long-term plan, whether it be in business, trading, fitness, whatever it may be. Do not let a little loss that's inevitable completely take you away from your long-term goals and plan. Okay? All right, everybody. So that's it. Thank you for attending this presentation, educational webinar on the psychology of losing. Ensure to stack this webinar with the other psychology webinars. More importantly, normalizing losses in trading, as it talks about more detail about the probability focus in trading. Okay? So I'm going to save and upload this, and I'll see all of you later for our usual Sunday work.